How do you feel, okay, when you think back on that early pandemic period, let's say March through the rest of the year 2020? Sit with that feeling for a second and tell me what comes to mind when you think of really the gut feelings from that very first wave of the pandemic.
Okay, I'm sitting with it. I I think about the last person I talked to, Christine Struble, who's sitting right outside my office, who's been here longer than I have. I've been at Wyndham Worldwide now for 15 years. Christine's been here 25. She's seen it all. And I remember saying, as we had all left the meeting room, it was March 13th. It was a Friday evening. Is that correct, Laura?
Yes.
March 13th. Um, we had announced to the building that we would be closing the office indefinitely, but I remember asking her when she thought we'd be back, and she said I'd give it a week. And I said, "Wow, that's
Mm.
optimistic." I had been in the city that week. We were on a non-deal roadshow, and the city was emptying out. We were one of the first hotel companies. We were, I think, one of the first in our neighborhood here in Parsippany to close down. But we were hearing that, and we have a lot of members on our team who are related to, work with, married to folks working over at Morristown Hospital that were talking about how they were preparing. We have a lot of friends. We're in the pharmaceutical zip code of the folks that were working at Novartis, which I still do not think is reopened. Pfizer, that we're talking about this pandemic. So yeah, it was a very very emotional time. Telling people that they were leaving the office, that they could take their computers, they could take their chairs.
Mhm.
Many were asking, could they take their
Mhm.
their some of their office equipment? And we were saying yes to everything, not at all being sure about when would be back.
Does it feel, Geoff, like it's been 3 years, or does it feel like 300 years?
3 years isn't that long a time, but it feels a lot longer than 3 years. I think it feels like 13 years ago when we think of everything that's happened in this industry, what's happened with our company, what's happened with our team. 300 years is a bit of an exaggeration, but it does feel a lot longer to me
More
than
than
three
3
years.
years, right, for sure, a
Yeah.
lot has packed in there. Can you share an example, back as we're still thinking back on that initial time, can you share an example of something that felt like a big victory for you in those early weeks? Getting one key thing accomplished, maybe that you absolutely knew had to get done. Could even be a small victory, like being able to push send on that email that told people, okay, you're going to go home for a period of time. What represented a victory to you in those early days?
I'd say in the early hours, I was the last person to leave this building. I insisted Christine leave before I did. She was insisting I did. I pushed her out the door. We had been meeting all day long as a team in the boardroom, our boardroom here at our world headquarters, right next door to me. Um, and I was driving up to see my mother in Boston and three of my daughters who are nurses in Boston and my wife. And we had released right before I left that evening a communication to all of our North American, and no, not North American, all of our global ownership, all of our franchisees, all of our small business owners, about the things that we had decided that week, that Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, as we were contemplating running this operation remotely, that we could do for our franchisees. The biggest in that note being that we knew occupancy was beginning to fall, and we knew how uncertain the times were ahead of us, that they would not be required to pay any of their receivables to Wyndham for we were in March, the months of March, April, May, June, July, indefinitely until they could, and that we would not be assessing any interest charges for those receivables. We would not be looking for anything in return in terms of extensions on contracts, as I know some of them were concerned about, or waiver of windows. And we were talking about, it was a 2 or 3 page memorandum that Maura might be able to share with you, about the things that we thought were going to be important to them in this unbelievably uncertain period. And I had turned my phone back on as soon as I drove out of the parking lot here at 22 Sylvan Way, and it was just lit up with text messages, and it began to ring from franchisees and small business owners expressing their incredible gratitude and sincerity, not having seen that yet from anyone else in the industry, in terms of how much they appreciated that. And that has come back over the 3 years, 4 years. It's approaching now. We're in our 4th year.
That's right.
So many of gratitude from our franchisees in terms of the support that they felt from our team during that initial period, that first day that we closed our office and sent that note out, throughout the pandemic. And we could talk for hours about, as so many other companies I'm sure can, in terms of things that they did to support their small business owners. I think the best, in terms of measurement of impact for us as a company, the best measurement is always franchisee engagement. And the best data point on franchisee engagement is our annual retention rate. And we watched our annual retention rate of our small business owners continue to improve throughout COVID. It went from the 94s to the 95s in a pretty dramatic clip and fashion. And more importantly, just was very much appreciated by small business owners who did not realize how quickly their business would come back, and were as anxious about it as we all were.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like you really zeroed in on, that one thought that would definitely be on the top of mind of franchise owners, which was, how we're going to make the payments. How are you finding ways to go after those moments of gratitude now? When we look 3 years later, a lot of businesses are back to running things the exact same way they did before, especially in a period of, some financial challenges, economic challenges. Do you think you're running your business the same way today as you did on this day in 2019? Or have you profoundly changed your approach?
I would say the changes have been profound on many different levels in the economy, in the mid-scale select service space, in terms of the flexibility that we continued throughout that period to show owners. Obviously, costs have been a big issue for owners. Many brands out there showed a lot of flexibility. We were the first big brand to realize that in the economy space, hot breakfast didn't necessarily have to be something that they would have to do throughout COVID, obviously. So we eliminated that, as everybody else did, as a brand standard. We led on that, but we have not brought it back. We have not brought it back because guests haven't been demanding it come back. Our quality scores have continued to improve. But our big brands like Days Inn and Super 8, it was never a defining attribute of what attracted a guest to a stay at a Days Inn, a hot breakfast. Instead, it was a obviously clean, well-maintained, impeccably maintained room at a great value. And so those type of operating standards that were put in place to obviously help them throughout the pandemic on the cost side have stuck, and I think will continue to stick. The technology improvements that we made throughout COVID, none of us realized the power of QR codes. I had never used Zoom. There were so many things that we're able to do from a customer data platform, from a Salesforce platform. We introduced the latest Salesforce Lightning platform to all of our franchisees to really help them automate their business, their workflow, what goes on in their daily in their daily operation. Mobile booking apps. We, in the midst of the pandemic, were able to roll out, really helping them from check-in to check-out. Mobile key in the select service space really hadn't been pushed out the way we pushed it out. Mobile tipping. I think there is so many technology advancements, in addition to the brand standards everybody immediately did and talked about, that have been introduced, that in terms of how our managers, directors of operations, our franchise service directors support our hotels, will be, I think, forever changed in terms of the ease and the cost savings, given the constraints of labor throughout the pandemic, and the increased cost of labor throughout the pandemic, that have really actually, our franchisees had a better 2021 than they did 2019, which is pretty incredible. I mean, we've talked before about how our franchisees break even with an occupancy of roughly 30%. And here they were doing significantly better than 30% occupancy with all of these technology improvements, brand standard flexibility improvements that were really on a cost per occupied room, increasing their margin. And to see 22 better than 21, 21 being better than 2019, everything we showed from a flexibility standpoint in terms of our engagement, in terms of pay us back when you can, while we were obviously concerned a bit about a lot about what that would mean from a cash flow standpoint to our business came back faster than anyone would have expected. 21 being better than 19, 22 being better than 21, and we're off to an amazing start in 23, which is why it feels a lot longer than 3 years ago.
That's got to blow your mind a little bit. I don't want to use the term silver lining of the pandemic, but almost a unexpected side effect when you look back and think, oh, we should have been doing this stuff for so much longer as an industry. What an acceleration over the last 3 years in terms of a lot of those programs that have made collectively the industry, I think, a lot more efficient.
We've tried. Our technology team, Scott Strickland and his group, I think one of the most talented teams in the industry, thought of things at every turn on how, if hiring guest service agents at the front desk is a challenge, how do we allow the one or two that you have to not have to answer the telephone? We didn't mandate that we could take all of the calls coming into your hotel off of your PABX and route them to a professionally run call center, where we didn't lay off anybody. In fact, we staffed up because 5,000 of our franchisees raised their hand and said, sign me up for what we call signature reservation services, where we're not making any money on it, but we are taking all the calls that would free that one front desk agent at a Days Inn or a Super 8 or La Quinta to check that guest in while we were able to make the reservation, make the booking, or answer the question of what was coming in. Same thing with texting. I mean, we weren't even thinking about how we could text guests to take the load off of the small business owner, the franchisee, when it came to the calls that would come in from a guest in terms of directions or a question they might have about their upcoming stay. So those things, Steph, I think are all gonna stay with us. I don't think any of that goes back to the way it was before.
Mm-hmm. So let me ask you, Geoff, can you share any examples of something that you feel in hindsight? Those are all good things that in hindsight turned out well, but anything that you feel you wish you would have done differently, something that kind of might tug at your heart or pop into your brain every now and then and think, oh, I wish I would have done it differently?
Well, there's a lot of things, as Maura knows, that tug at my heart that I wish I would have done differently. I think the toughest thing that everybody in this industry went through, we were certainly no exception, was saying goodbye here at the corporate level, not so much out in the field, really not at all in the field, in terms of the franchisee owner facing personnel, but at the corporate level, saying goodbye to some really talented people who had been here for dozens, decades, often in terms of doing what we thought was an appropriate thing, given that we weren't in the office and we didn't know how long as those weeks became months. But the one thing I would say that we were really proud of, we closed on March 13th. By the first week of April, we let everybody who was going to be impacted, who through no fault of their own, great people, friends, family, we let them know that we would not be needing them so they could go out and find another job. One of the things we didn't want to do was place these team members on furlough with a question mark of, we're not sure if we're going to have a job when the home office here in New Jersey decides to reopen. But it's still, I mean, what tugs at your heart is saying, goodbye to people that you were, again, through no fault of their own, incredibly close with. And we're doing a great job in areas like the mailroom that might, never ever be the same again. I don't think I've used this telephone since I've been back in the middle of November, in terms of as opposed to my cell phone. You know how that, are you
Right.
using the telephone
No,
there?
the telephone
No,
on the
because
desk is going to be
so many things
a
changed,
relic.
and so many people that supported functions like that were changing. But it was obviously a very emotional time. But we felt good about I don't think you could ever over communicate or communicate more quickly when it comes to team members. Things that we might have, I often think I've done differently, and I wonder about this often, is when was the right time to launch a new construction brand that we've talked a lot with you about and covered since we announced it, Echo Suites by Wyndham. I mean, there's no reason,
Right.
I often ask myself, that while there wasn't a Hunter Investment Conference in 21, that we couldn't have launched Echo Suites by Wyndham in 21, as opposed to launching it at the Hunter Investment Conference in 22, which I think is the last time I interviewed by you, right outside, walking out right outside the launch
Yes.
of my general session panel. We launched that in March of 2022. We announced on our third quarter call, we had awarded 120 contracts. We just had a fourth quarter call where we announced 170 contracts. I could tell you today we're at 200 contracts, which we'll talk about on our next call. The demand for that brand just took off, because I think the one truism in this business is our small business owners, our franchisees, firmly, honestly believe that there is no better time to be building a select service extended stay product or a select service hotel to begin with than right now, because they really believe in their core that we're at the very beginning, maybe the first inning of what will hopefully be like the cycle that ended in 2019, an 11-inning game. So if I could build a hotel today, well, we could have, our team could have maybe been a bit faster on that, but you can't think back. We're happy that it's the fastest growing brand in the industry for 2022,
And it does make you realize too, just, we think a lot about how we change ourselves or how we may have done things differently or how it affected us personally, but everybody was going through those same types of questions at wherever they were in the business. So seems to me that people within the larger hotel industry, whether they're franchise owner, brand, anybody, has just really dug into that reflection in terms of finding what works for the moment, recognizing that the world has changed in such a large way that it does have an impact on how people travel, where they stay, how they're approaching it, that wouldn't have been the same had this pandemic not happened and we had just continued on our merry way for the last 3 years. That's just my take.
I agree.
So, Geoff, I have two more questions for you. And this one is about how you think relationships with people have changed as a whole. In those very early days, I think there was so much, people understanding that we were all going through this, that idea of we're all going through this together. So let's share grace. Is that still there? Or do the realities of running a business that needs to be profitable in a time that it is tough to do so prevail, and some of those human touch parts of relationships fall away, do you think, or do you hang on to those?
Oh, I don't think you only hang on to them. I think that become stronger in terms of the trust that as I began, we have with our franchisees, the best measure being, again, retention, which moved from in the depths of the pandemic, 92 to 93 to 94 to 95, kept climbing to our relationship with our team members. I talked early on about how tough it was to say goodbye to trusted, valued team members, but we did it with tremendous empathy. We did it early. We let them know their fate early. We did not keep them on furlough and then say goodbye. And we also communicated in the spirit of transparency and honesty and communication really early as we were reopening our offices in the fall of 21, that when we surveyed, as everybody did, as I'm sure your company did, team members often about what they were looking for in this new working relationship when we come back. And we announced very early that we will be hybrid, that we will be in the office Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, but we will be hybrid. This headquarters will be closed on Monday and Friday. And that went such a long way when we said to them early on, right from the outset, that it would not change, that we would not be changing our mind and requiring you to come in on Monday or Friday, 3 months from now, 6 months from now, a year from now. And a remarkable thing happened. We finished 2022 with a full year. We announced it in the fall of 21 with a higher team member retention rate than we had back in 2019. And so the relationship between our team leaders, our senior leadership team, and the team members they lead, I think has become a lot more trusting. We knew how much harder our team members here corporately and around the country and around the world, in our offices in London or Dubai or Singapore or Shanghai, we knew how much harder, because of the changes we were making, because our business model was changing in so many ways, and technology was changing it. We knew that a lot of our team members had more on our plate, but that it was absolutely positively okay if you had moved and you were suddenly in Florida, or you were in California, or you're living in Vail, but had a job where you could continue to do it remotely, that was okay as well. And I think there's a lot more trust. We just WSA, the spinoff of Connexa, just completed its first employee engagement survey since COVID, and we had not only the highest participation rate of our corporate team members around the world, we had the highest results, significantly above the high performing norms of the 20 million companies that they track. And so I do think we have a happier and a more productive workforce and team than we ever have. And I know for a fact that we have a much more engaged group of small business owners than we had pre-COVID, because of that all important voluntary retention rate.
And trust is that key word, isn't it? Because trust absolutely has to be earned, and it's not just given in
Absolutely.
a fake way.
Yeah.
So last question for you, Geoff. This one's going to be a fun one. If you could go back in time, let's say to April 2020, and give yourself a piece of advice or even an item that might have helped you at the time, what would it be?
I say this to my four daughters all the time. It's get more sleep. I really believe in the power, especially in stressful periods of time, but just we're all aging in the power of sleep, of getting more than your fair share of sleep, of getting over 8 hours of sleep. I think I slept 9, maybe 10 hours last night. And I'm up and out of the house at 5 o'clock every day, but I love to be in bed with a good book by 7:30, 8 o'clock if I can. And I usually don't get more than a page or two or three. Turn on that good book before I fall asleep. I don't think there's anything more important than shutting off, especially throughout those COVID days, and realizing that everything that is on your desk, everything that is on your plate, all the pressure, we'd say this to our team all the time, is going to be there in the morning at 5 a.m. or 7 a.m. or 9 a.m. whenever you you decide to wake up. I know I have a lot of night owls on my team that don't ever fall asleep before midnight because they're sending me emails at midnight. I'm just not reading them at midnight. I'm asleep, and that and exercise. I think everybody, all of us, everybody we talk to,
Mm-hmm.
everybody that we know is in better shape, I think, today, by and large, than they were before COVID because of realizing the importance of not only sleep but exercise.